Howdy folks, Pilgrim here. Folks, in my last video I talked about visions and dreams and things like that, and that wasn't accidental. I did that for a reason, because I think I made that on Tuesday, but last Saturday, not the one that's just gone by, a week ago before that, last Saturday I had a dream, and I'm not going to say too much about that and make a big deal out of that. The only reason why I mention it is because it drew attention to a really important principle. Okay. The dream took me by surprise because I experienced it full on, not as if I was having a dream, but as if I was there and this was it. That was the only option. Once you're at that point in time, it was speaking about being in the kingdom. After we go to meet the king face to face, the judgment and things like that. When you're at that point of time, it is no longer a dream. There's no going back. And if you've made a mistake by then, the mistake is eternal. Okay? This dream is a little bit confusing to describe in words, even though I understood it in imagery, because it was mixing this life with being up there. I saw the place of work that I was working in, and it'd say something. What's the worst thing you can think of? For me, it's human trafficking. Okay, that's the greatest evil on the face of the earth, as far as I'm concerned. The kidnapping of people and selling them and using them as slaves, which goes on right in the heart of America. You know what I mean? Taking them out of their ordinary lives when they're when they go to the shops to get a loaf of bread for their family. Boom, they never come back. That young mother or someone like that is now, her life has been turned into something worse than hell. To me, that's the evil. Okay. In this dream, this woman who was working at at my place of work was involved in human trafficking, and I take it only to be as an example. Okay. And then the kind of dream mixes, as I say, between here and there, and then I'm up there, and I'm seeing this woman in heaven, and I begin to be really incredulous. And it's kind of like there's no private thoughts up there. If you think it, it is heard. Because down here we have this thin veil of flesh where we can keep our thoughts to ourselves. But, thoughts motivate hearts, and it motivates our actions. It makes a lot of sense when you consider Jesus' words where he says, as a man thinks, so he is. Alright? Now that doesn't mean that all the problems that we have, for example, people with Asperger's syndrome or ADHD who suffer intrusive thought, it doesn't mean that they are the content of all of those things that fly into their mind. Because down here on earth we have all kinds of problems. Mental health issues and so on. Asperger's syndrome, you name it. But more deliberate thought. Personal decision, how we feel about other people. That's the way I'm going to interpret that. You know what I mean? Our attitude, our chosen attitude towards other people. And this woman who was guilty of human trafficking, and I saw her up there, and I kept my words to myself, but how I felt about this person, because how I felt I felt so strongly about this woman, it's like it came across as shouting. And and even though I didn't put words to it, and I was looking at this woman, and this woman worked in the dream to get me fired because she knew what I knew and she didn't want to be exposed. The next thing, I'm seeing her in heaven, and I'm there too with her, and I'm feeling, and I walk over to her and I say, why did you knew this and that and blah blah blah, and she smiles very sweetly and says, well, you weren't very good, so that's the way it is. And then I get really angry, And she walks through these doors of the place of work, which I now understand to be like the doors of heaven. She walks in there with her children, and then I'm saying to these two angels that are marching towards me, why does she get to walk in there with her children? And these two angels took me, one under each arm, and dragged me backwards. And they literally took me to the end of this roadway. It was way up in space. I could see it. It's just a imagery, just symbolizations. And they literally flung me into outer darkness, kicked out of heaven. And I woke up from this dream, and I was so shocked and horrified by this dream, because it had been so real. It's like I was really there. I was so horrified by this dream. It was so real. There was no dream quality to this. I was there. And I haven't mentioned it before now because it took me 2 days to think about this. When I immediately woke up, I could not conceive. I could not believe. I could not conceive of the idea that there was injustice in heaven. This woman that done these things, then she gets me fired. Then she walks in there with her children, and I get flung out. I could not understand it. I couldn't conceive of what the meaning of this dream could be, what was being said to me. And like I said, I've kept quiet about it because I had to think about this for 2 days. 2 days solid. I could not figure this out, and that's when I posted my last video, and I started mentioning dreams and visions and so on, because I think I was beginning to get it, to understand it. No, there's no injustice in heaven, but God reads the heart. It even says that in the book of Enoch, which I don't put a lot of faith in, but it does touch on a couple of points which are important, as far as private thoughts, where God says, as a man thinks, so he is. And even there, in a conversation between God and Satan, God identifies what's in Satan's heart, and Satan doesn't dare to deny it, because, of course, everyone knows that God tells the truth, and then that would be a pointless discussion. But I just it began to dawn on me, certain things that I've been holding on to. That this dream was about forgiveness. I've said it before, and and of course we've all heard it before, but have we really considered what it really, really means? That in the judgment, there's going to be some surprises. People that we think ought not to be there will be there, and people that we think are doing just fine being thrown out because of unforgiveness. Who are we to hold another man's sins against somebody else? Imagine going to heaven. Think about this. Think about this. Imagine going to heaven in the judgment, and you see Adolf Hitler standing right there in the ranks, being welcomed into heaven. Now your first reaction is, oh, that's ridiculous. Okay, it's an extreme example, we get the point, but that's ridiculous. What if you saw that? Your first reaction is to go up to the Lord at some convenient time and ask questions. That's exactly the point in the dream. You don't have any business doing that. You have no business doing that. You open your mouth to ask questions. It's a strong indicator of unforgiveness there. And you're holding against someone else what belongs only to God. Do not pick God's pockets. And I've had to really, and I'm not saying all this to you guys. This was a message to me. We've got to let go of all of our baggage and be presuming about no one at all. We don't know what anyone's fate is. We have the rapture coming toward us. We have the judgment coming toward us. We have the tribulation coming toward us. There are so many more important things to consider right now than picking out other people's faults. How are we treating other Christians? Christians who disagree with us. Obviously bad people. What about those, murderers, rapists, shooters, and so on? Do you understand what I'm saying? It was a real shock to me to be flung out of heaven in this dream. It scared me a lot. And I've been almost it took me 2 days to figure out what the dream meant. It's taken me almost a week to get into, to really overcome the shock that it gave me. A lot of fear. It was such a shock to my system. It gave me a lot to think about, and I really had to change and evaluate, or make sure that I'm looking at people in the correct way, or as correct a way as I know, with constant forgiveness in my heart. No grudge bearing. Don't hold grudges against one another or against anybody, Don't ever speak ill of the dead. Any dead. Even the Bible says, who are you to judge another man's servant? Some people have been used to do some pretty ugly things on the earth, but we don't know what was in their heart and all the workings out that, that we don't know. I'll give you an example. Saddam Hussein, okay? Bad guy, dictator, did terrible things. Yeah, we know that. Did you know that, no one is left without a chance of a witness here on this earth. Did you know that Saddam Hussein surrounded himself, even when Christians were being persecuted for their faith in his country, he surrounded himself, his bodyguards, his advisors, and so on and so on, all of those that surrounded him all the time, he surrounded himself deliberately with Christians. You know why? Because none of the Muslims could be trusted. He couldn't trust a single man in the entire land not to assassinate him. But he surrounded himself with Christians because he knew that they were true to their word. Right until the point of his death. This is the witness that we carry. This is the name that we carry. Don't ever presume upon anybody. The kingdom is coming, and warnings are being given. God bless you, and perhaps we'll see each other soon.